The following message is from Hillsdale Baptist Church in Advance, North Carolina. Learn more about Hillsdale by visiting their website, www.hillsdalebaptistchurch.org. Thanks for listening. Now here is the message.
Would like to have it. So we are in chapter 5, where we are now. It's going to take us probably about 2 years to get all the way through this at chapter. Just kind of like Daniel, we might get to the point 2 years in, then I just stop the last 2 chapters and not cover them. And it's like I'm taking it very slow just in case Jesus decides to show up, and that's always where we are. That's right. It's like I'm going to pray for like the sections that I'm not quite completely certain what it means, so I don't have to like make a stand, and just God will show us. That's the simplest way for it to work. All right, so tonight last time 2 weeks ago when we met, we started chapter 5. So the way it works, we have the first 3 chapters of Revelation, which basically is the letters to the churches. And the interesting fact that I pointed out before, but I'll point out again, is once you get to chapter 4, there's no more mention of the church. So one of the reasons why many people feel that the church is raptured before the tribulation is because when we start in chapter 4, chapter 5, and specifically when we get to chapter 6, when the scroll is open and the judgment starts to happen, one of the key components for the premillennial or the pre-trib belief system is that there's no more mention of the church. So they stop mentioning there, and then everything else from 4, 5, and specifically 6 on is for the people who are on earth, the people who are experiencing it. At no point in time does he reference the church. No point in time does he ever say the church is going to do this. So it's an interesting, if you're just looking at hermeneutics, you're looking at how words are and how they fall in the Bible. That's one of the good, solid stances that we could have as Christians who believe that the church will be raptured before these things will happen, and also backs up to our beliefs in chapter 4 that the 24 elders are members of the church along with the other saints who are going to be there. We'll see those show up a little bit later in chapter 5. But all of those folks are the raptured church. So just some more food for thought for you just to tie in there. But where we started last week, or the last time, was we only looked at one verse. It was crucial for us to look at that one verse because we emphasized the fact of what the scroll is that Jesus, or that God's holding, that Jesus ultimately is going to open. So I have for you at the start, we always use review questions that are from the previous lesson just to help us jump and leapfrog into where we're going. So I have 2 questions from last week, or 2 statements. The first one is, the scroll is a deed to the what? Earth, or we could actually say universe. So the earth, or you could say universe, and it's documentation of who really owns it. We spent a lot of time last time looking at what those scrolls emphasized in the ancient Near East time, and those documents, how it was sealed, those types of aspects of that. More times than not, this was some sort of contractual agreement or some sort of deed. And so when we look at this, we see it being a deed to the world, a deed to the universe. And so the question 2 throws in there, when we looked at those deeds, when we looked at those things, you have to have someone who's eligible to open it. But at the same time too, when you do open it, most of the time it explains this is the person who's supposed to get the property, and it's just this whole clarifier of this is what it is, this is what all it is. The neat thing about this one is this deed doesn't tell us why God owns it, but rather how he's going to take it. So that's one of the neat things about this. The deeds would say, well, Ebenezer had this amount of land, he's going to give it to his son, it started here, went to there. This one just simply says, this is mine, and this is how I'm going to claim it. And so when we see this deed that God is holding, that's where we're going to get that from. So we looked at Ezekiel, and we looked at Daniel, at those scrolls and those words that were written down and were told to be sealed up for the time. Like we look specifically at Daniel. At the end of Daniel, at the end of that book, he has this scroll, and a lot of things that are being mentioned and described that we're going to see is very similar to what Daniel saw. And so it's actually good Bible belief that what Daniel is sealing up here is what we're going to be unrolling as we move forward. Because Daniel wanted to know how this happened. At the end of the book Daniel, Daniel's like, show me, tell me, when will this take place? And God, or Jesus specifically tells Daniel, it's not for you to know, but it'll be saved for the end time. And many of us in the church will believe that what we're opening up now is what Daniel helped seal up. So I think that's kind of neat. All right, so where we begin today is, will tie into what I finished preaching this past Sunday, that series in Luke 21, is that I believe that all people, unless you're mentally disabled or just mentally weird, desire peace. We all desire peace. The Bible has a word that's called shalom, which means peace, and not just natural, no fighting, but universal peace. Everything is happening the way it's supposed to happen. To the smallest atom, to the greatest cosmo, everything is functioning the way it wants to. And we all desire that deeply. And Isaiah speaks about it the most. And I love one of the prophecies that Isaiah gives. Isaiah 11 says this: "For the wolf will dwell with the lamb, and the leopard will lie down with the goat. The calf, the young lion, and the fatted calf will be together, and a child will lead them. The cow and the bear will graze. Their young ones will lie down together, and the lion will eat straw like cattle. An infant will play beside the cobra's pit, and a toddler will put his hand in a snake's den. They will not harm or destroy each other or on my entire holy mountain. For the land will be as full of knowledge of the Lord as the sea is filled with the water." Isn't that just a beautiful picture? That's just an absolutely beautiful picture. But no matter how we may dream of this kind of world, no matter how we may plan for it, no matter how human institutions might try to invent or devise or to attempt to create that, the world just gets what? Worse. No matter how hard we try, it just gets worse. So that leads us to the key question, and that's where we're going tonight, is who can bring us back to Eden? Who can bring us back to restore paradise like it once was? When you get to the end of chapter 1 of Genesis, there's shalom. There is peace. There is calm. There's peace between man. There's peace between animals. One of the things I'd find unique, I'm not a big fan of Ken Ham. I'm just not in general. I can go along with his logic a lot of times. His personality is what baffles me a little bit more. I just don't necessarily like his personality as much. He's the guy that has the Ark in the Creation Museum. I strongly support it. I'm all for it. But one of the theories that he throws out there, he talks about, like, the animals didn't eat one another because the predators weren't predators in Genesis 1. And he talks about that the animals didn't start attacking one another until the curse was set in. One of the logic that actually can back that up some is that prophecy I just told you. Because if you notice that the cattle and the lion and the predators and the prey, they live together. The animals didn't attack humans. Humans didn't attack animals. So that kind of gives you a picture that maybe what he was saying, might have some truth to it. But again, that's another thing. But it comes back to the question looms over the world: who can bring us back to Eden? Who can restore the paradise? Who can reverse the curse? And who can bring us to a true utopia? Because the world will try anything they can to do that, but ultimately they're not going to be able to. And there is only one person who has the right and the power to take back the universe from sin and from Satan. That one person is the main character in chapter 5. He is the central person in this incredible vision. So that's what we're going to see. The one who can restore the peace that was lost in paradise is the one who's going to be focused on and worshipped in chapter 5. And so as we talked about it last week, if we looked at verse 1, then I saw in the right hand the one seated on the throne, a scroll with writing on both sides, sealed with 7 seals. So in the upturned palm of God, we see this little scroll. This is the deed to the universe. God has it, and it is rightfully His. It is the official document that grants the created universe to God by His own ownership. So most of these kinds of official documents had inside a description of why the person designated possessed it, whatever the property that it was. This scroll doesn't have the why, as I said earlier. It has the how. And when it's unrolled, it doesn't tell us why God owns everything. It tells us how He is going to take it over. And that's where we show up in verse 2. So we're going to look at the most important question that we hope to be able to come close to answering. We're going to spend more time with it next time, is who is worthy to enact this scroll? Who is worthy to execute this scroll? So we're going to look at verses 2 through 4, and here's the text that we're looking at. I also saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals?" But no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or even look in it. I wept and wept because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or even to look in it. So let's take a little bit and we'll look at each of these verses, point out a few things, and then kind of close it up toward the end. Verse 2, I saw a mighty angel proclaiming with a loud voice. Notice here that it just says mighty angel. Some commentators, and even in some study Bibles, it will assign Michael or Gabriel to this role. We have to read the Bible as the Bible says. And what I want you to know is that we do not know, number one, we do not know the identity of this mighty angel. So be conscious of that when you're reading commentaries. This is just one of those little things I put in the text today just so that you would have it in your mind that if you're reading a study Bible or you're looking at a commentary or someone's writing, and if the Bible says there is no name to somebody and there's no direct relationship, be a little bit more weary. Let that be a little red flag that pops up because this is an unknown angel. It could be Michael. It could be Gabriel. But let's don't assign a name to something that we don't know for certain. So, but what we do know is that whoever this angel is they are proclaiming with a loud voice. So the word proclaiming has inherent in it to mean speak what? Loud. I mean, you're supposed to be speaking louder. But then notice it says it proclaims with a loud voice, which makes it unique because if you're going to proclaim, it's loud, but then they're going to proclaim even louder. And the reason why they're proclaiming louder, number 2, the angel is opening this question up to all things in the universe. So I want you to see the scale in which this question that's going to be asked is being derived to. It's not just being said to those who are there. This angel is proclaiming a question to the entire universe. He wants his voice to penetrate every corner of the universe. It's the reason why they put more emphasis on not just saying he proclaimed to the universe. It says proclaim with a loud voice. It's trying to draw our attention to say that this angel is now projecting outward in a much larger viewpoint than just those who are there in heaven, just beyond what John can see. It's opening up to everything. So the question the angel is about to ask is supposed to be open to all things in the universe. Questions on that? Okay. And what is the question they ask? Who is worthy to open the scroll and break its seals? That's the most important question. That's the most important question in this first little section here. The question, number 3, the question speaks to a person who is 2 things. Worthy, and you'll see in verse 3, able to open the scrolls. So the question speaks to a person who is worthy and able to open the scrolls. So again, when you're reading prophecy, read it first like a newspaper, like I said on Sunday. You look at it just at the facts. So when you get a mental image, even though this is indescribable for John to actually be able to write, it's still enough for us to have a mental image. And so it's kind of like everyone's attention is drawn to this scroll. And John, in his mind, is thinking, this is it. This is it. It is time. And now everything is going to wage on, I want to know what's in this scroll. That's what his heart is saying right now. His heart is saying, I want to know what this is. So the angel asks, who is worthy to open? Who has the innate, inherent worthiness of character and the virtue? That's the worth part of it. Who has that virtue and that character? Who is qualified to break the seal? Because it has to be someone who can inherit it that's going to open it. So when we have these deeds, as we looked last week, when you open this up, it's going to be the person who's going to inherit this, in which is the one who's going to open it. So who is the rightful heir? To whom does this inheritance belong? So that moves over this question, who is not only worthy, but who is able. So who is able to throw out Satan? Who can wipe out demonic power? Who can destroy sinners? Who can obliterate sin? Who can reverse the curse on animals, on plants, on human body and mind? Who has the power and who has the privilege in order to do that? Who is worthy? Who has the heritage? Who is the divine prodigy? Who has a right to possess it? And who has the ability, the power, and the might to overthrow the intruders? That's what it's going to take to open this deed. That's how crucial this is. So number 4, not being able to answer the question should humble the hearts of the most proud, but it won't. I wrote that question because I would love, if I were in that situation, I'd be like, I'll open it. I'll open it. If I have an idea of what's inside of that, and someone's going to say, who will open it? I'll be like, bring it. I want to do it. But at the same time, I have to recognize I'm not worthy. I'm not able. I need someone else to do it. This question should humble Christians because we can't. And even how much we desire it, we aren't the ones who will rule the world. Christ is. And we are joint heirs with Christ, but it's got to be Christ first. Verse 3 goes on, but no one in heaven or on earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or even look in it. No one. Again, John is the focal point of, like, if you have a vision of this, you have John I'm looking at this through John's point of view. He's mesmerized by this ruby red fiery throne and this emerald rainbow and this crystal platform. He sees all these things. He sees the elders. He sees the creatures. He sees all of this. And so this scroll shows up and he's like, all right, who's going to do it? Who's going to do it? But what happens? Verse 3, no one in heaven or earth or under the earth was able to open the scroll or even look in it. Number 5, as the echoes of the angel's proclamation receded, there is only more silence. I don't know if this is the pregnant pause that you're supposed to put into dialogue at times. As a pastor, they're told that you're just supposed to, at times, slow down your speech and stop so that the next thing you say has emphasis. I don't know if this is the pregnant pause. I don't know how long this break happens before Christ shows up, but it's enough to really do something to John. The powerful archangel, Michael and Gabriel, they don't answer. Uncounted thousands of other angels, they don't answer. All the righteous dead of all the ages, including Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Job, Moses, David, Solomon, Elijah, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, they're all there. And they don't speak up. Peter and the rest of the apostles, Paul and all the others from the first church, they all say nothing. Number 6, a search of the entire universe, from heaven to hell and all points in between, turns up no one worthy to open the scroll. Again, have John's perspective. Even if he doesn't see all those faces, the reality for him is that they're there. And no one opens. A search of the entire universe from heaven to hell and all points in between, and turns up no one. So what's the response of John? That's what we have in verse 4. I wept and wept. No one was found worthy to open the scroll or even to look in it. I wept and wept. John is overwhelmed from grief and dismay because no one speaks up. The deed isn't claimed, the curse is not reversed, and sin still reigns. That's John's perspective. The Greek word for wept, number 7, expresses strong, and here's the key word, unrestrained emotion. Weep is from the Greek word kaleo. The same word described Jesus weeping over Jerusalem. So if you remember that, as he approached, Luke 19, as he approached and saw the city, he wept for it, saying, if you knew this day would bring peace, but now it's hidden from your eyes. For the days are come on you when your enemies will build a barricade around you, surround you, and hem you in on all sides. And they will crush you and your children among you to the ground, and they will not leave one stone or another in your midst, because you did not recognize the time when Jesus visited you. That's prophetic in itself from what we've been talking. The same word, wept, is also used for Peter in Luke 22. But Peter said, man, I don't know what you're talking about. Immediately, he was still speaking, a rooster crowed. Then the Lord turned and looked at Peter. So Peter remembered the word of the Lord and how he had said to him, before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. And he went outside and wept bitterly. That's the emotion that John's feeling. I'm taking time to really emphasize that, because when we read the text, because it's not a lot of text, we kind of gloss over the emotional aspect of what this could be. And specifically, I wanted to make it personal that even though we have a different view that John did at that time, we know the end of the story. John doesn't. And he wept. And it's interesting, number 8, this is the only time in Scripture that there are tears in heaven. That's the only times that we have in Scripture that there are tears in heaven. Now, just to prove that the Bible's not false when Jesus says there will be no more tears in heaven, I want to point out something, that this is the only time, like I said, but John is the only one weeping. No one else in that scene, from what the Bible describes to us, is weeping. Only John. And the reason why is because he's a guest of heaven. He's not a full-time resident of heaven. I think one of the things that will be made known to us when we get to heaven is we'll see this, or we'll have knowledge of this. This will not be new knowledge for us when we get to heaven.
That's why none of us go for the scroll.
Right. That's what.
We know who's worthy.
Right.
All of the creation, all of eternal creation knows who is worthy except John.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are. I liked one of these quotes from W.A. Creswell. He wrote a book in the 60s on Revelation, and he's responding to John's tears and explaining why John is crying. He said, John's tears represent the tears of all of God's people through all of centuries. Those tears of the Apostle John's are the tears of Adam and Eve, driven out of the Garden of Eden, as they bowed over the first grave, as they watered the dust of the ground with their tears over the silent, still form of their son Abel. Those are the tears of the children of Israel in bondage, as they cried out unto God in their affliction and slavery. They are the tears of God's elect through the centuries as they cried unto heaven. They are the sobs and the tears that have been wrung from the heart and soul of God's people as they look out on the silent dead, as they stand beside their open graves, as they experience the trials and sufferings of life, heartaches and disappointments indescribable. Such is the curse that sin has laid upon God's beautiful creation, And this is the damnation of the hand of him who holds it, the usurper, that interloper, that intruder, the alien, the stranger, that dragon, that serpent, that Satan devil. And I wept audibly for the failure to find a redeemer meant from the earth that is cursed to consign forever to death. It meant that death, sin, damnation, and hell should reign forever and ever, and the sovereignty of God's earth shall remain forever in the hands of Satan. That's the weight of John, feeling, knowing, seeing the answer, and knowing that it's not going, thinking that it's not going to be answered. So John's weeping, number 9. John's weeping was sincere, but premature. John's weeping was sincere, but premature. There's 2 really good examples of situations like this in the New Testament. The first one is from Luke, and it's when Jesus goes to Nain, N-A-I-N, ever how you pronounce that. And that's the text is Luke 7:11 through 14. Afterward, he was on his way to a town called Nain. His disciples and a large crowd were traveling with him. Just as he neared the gate of the town, a dead man was being carried out. He was his mother's only son, and she was a widow. A large crowd from the town was also with her. When the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her and said, "Don't weep." As he came up and touched the open coffin, the pallbearer stopped, and he said, "Young man, I tell you, get up." And he did. They were weeping because they didn't know that Jesus could do what Jesus did. And he did. The other example is another very similar, Luke 8. When Jesus heard it, he answered, "Don't be afraid." This is whenever the synagogue ruler's daughter died. When Jesus heard, that's when they came and said that your daughter has died. He answered them, "Don't be afraid, only believe, she will be saved." And he came to the house, and he let no one enter with him except Peter, John, and James, and the child's father and mother. Everyone was crying and mourning for her. But he said, "Stop crying, because she is not dead but asleep." They laughed at him because they said that she was dead. So he took her by the hand and called out, "Child, get up." Her spirit returned, and she got up at once. Then he gave orders, and he gave something to give her something to eat. Her parents were astounded, but he instructed them to tell no one that what had happened. These tears were inappropriate because of what Jesus was about to do. So same thing for John. John was weeping. His weeping was sincere, but it was premature. John wept because he wanted to see the world rid of evil, sin, and death. He wanted to see Satan vanquished and God's kingdom established on earth. He wanted to see Israel saved and Christ exalted. An interesting thing to know about John too, John knew, think about the timeline of John's life, and at the time of writing Revelation, John knew that the Messiah was executed. John had seen the temple in Jerusalem destroyed. The Jewish people were being massacred by the Romans and scattered, and he was well aware that the church faced intense persecution and was infected by sin. We saw that in Revelation 2 and 3. Everything seemed, from his perspective, to be going very wrong. But 10, John didn't need to weep because the search for the worthy one was about to end. He didn't need to weep. We know the one that's going to be able to hold it. So number 11, and here's how we're going to end today. We don't need to be like John when we see the tragedies of the world. We don't need to be like John when we see the tragedies of the world. We can still cry for pain that the tragedies create. However, uncontrolled emptiness or unrestrained despair should not be in the heart of the Christian. We need not to be like John when the tragedies of the world happen. We see our weakness. We see the impotence of our elected leaders. We may see the laws and culture changing for the bad. We see our logic. We're seeing calm logic being defeated. But in the end, the one who is worthy will take the scroll and make it right. Any questions?
Did God seal the scrolls?
I would think so. Yeah. I mean, to an extent, it has to be him, but we can also look at, he told Ezekiel, or he told Daniel to seal it up. He told John to seal it up. So it's a possibility there's more than one actor involved in the actual sealing it up. But ultimately, he's the wax melter.
Just one other thought. John's lived his whole life in the midst of all his persecution, believing that he's going to be a joint inheritor
Yeah.
of the kingdom of God. And if he comes out and brings the will, and there's the will, but nobody can undo it.
Right. And all of his life has been leading up to that moment. It's like, I have lived my life for you, God.
If that will doesn't get open, then a lot of what he lived for is not going to happen.
Right. Right. Any other thoughts? It's fun stuff. And I don't know if I'm going too slow or too fast for you, but I like diving into it like this. All right. With that said, let me close this in prayer. Heavenly Father,